Hello and welcome to the show. For today's Forza 7 challenge, we were going to be doing some obstacle course racing. The way that this works is 4 cars will be racing. In this case, we're using B-class cars, while the rest of the lobby are driving limos. Their aim is to take their limos around the circuit and, well, build obstacles out of them, add additional chicanes, park limos in awkward places, and generally completely and utterly change the layout of the circuit. Now, the players racing will have their map turned off, distance indicator, name over cars, etc. turned off. Now, I should say for the heats for this, we forgot to put the track warning message or the caution warning that comes up when there's a car parked on the road. So for the heats, we had a slight advantage. I completely forgot the first heat was run with it on by accident, so to keep it fair, everyone else did. So for the heats, people had a little bit of a warning. There might be a limo up ahead, but you don't know whereabouts it is. So it's an interesting sort of racing. We have done it on the past in previous Forza games. It'd been very, very good fun, so I wanted to have another go at it. The first heat, I'll be racing in this one with the Mercedes. There was a Honda Civic Type R, Nissan Silvia, and a Holden Ute. An interesting collection of vehicles. There were going to be 4 heats. For each heat, the winner would progress to the final. The Civic, being front-wheel drive, would be the slowest of the cars here off the line. The Holden, the fastest, although sometimes it is advantageous not to be the first car arriving towards turn 1 because we didn't know where the limos were going to be immediately. You kind of turn into the corner, suddenly limos, everybody panics and it changes direction. We get through the first obstacle with no real harm done. The Silvia tries to be sneaky going up the inside, although in doing that you end up across the roundabout. The Holden makes the mistake on the exit of the roundabout, then also makes a mistake carrying just a fraction too much speed through the next corner, clonking a limo. And of course, if there is a collision, if one of the racers bumps a limo, even at low speeds, it can move the limo around, and the limos can end up in some awkward places. Also, the limos, while they are allowed to move once the racers have gone past, as soon as they see a racer, they must remain stationary. The Holden, trying to make up for a little bit of a poor start, gets an overtake that on a Civic, kind of. Gets it stopped up the inside, but realises he's on too wider a line, and that there is an unfortunately rather chrome purple limo in the way. Has to grab reverse. No massive harm done to the Ute, however, a fair amount of time lost in all of that. I was up to second with the classic Mercedes. This is one of my B-class cars of choice. A fantastic race car. Did have a couple of issues with it. First gear is very long in it, which didn't really help matters when it came to trying to accelerate out of some of these roadblocks. Now, in these opening laps, these are only 5-lap races around here. So in these opening couple of laps, there was a fair bit of caution going on, especially when it came to some of the blind corners. The Civic, much, much braver through that sort of start-finish line roadblock. Makes up a little bit of time on us, of course, because he's seen where we've got. He's seen how much speed that we can take. I've now closed on to the back of the Silvia, but overtaking around a street circuit is difficult at the best of times. Long Beach isn't the easiest place to get overtakes done, let alone when you come up towards a good overtaking spot and there's a limo making the road very narrow, or you just don't know what's around the blind corners. That's why we use a street circuit, because, well, a lot of the corners here are very, very blind indeed, and because it's walled in. You can't just throw your car off the circuit to avoid the limos. You've really got to make the decision. And every time I'd get close to the Silvia, something would happen. We'd get stuck in a roadblock. I can't get going out of this chicane because my car's got absolutely no get-go with a very, very long first gear. The Civic actually ran a little bit wide into that corner, smacked the wall again, got away without too much damage in all of that. The first heat was going fantastically well. The Silvia continued to lead the way, made a little bit of mistake out of the final corner, just ran a smidge wide, clipped the side of a limo, lost a fair bit of momentum, but too wide around a very fast blind corner was always risky. No one really wanted to be flat out around that turn, not until you were absolutely desperate. You didn't want to be going flat out around there because you just never knew if there was going to be a car, if you could react in time. And likewise, heading into turn 1 here. I could have forced the point, however, we had a couple of laps to go, and I knew if I did and overcooked it, there was a limo in an awkward place that I'd end up breaking my car. I'd rather play it safe at this moment in time as a turquoise limo. It leaves that tantalising gap, and this was a tactic we saw a few of the obstacles doing. You leave that tantalising gap that's almost a car's width between the back of the vehicle and the wall, like a shorter route. See if anyone's brave enough to go for it. Me and the Silvia opting to not go for that particular route. Still, nowhere to really look for a way past. Silvia goes to the inside of one of them as I go around the outside. I'm still trying to get a better run, and I have got more speed over the course of a normal lap. Mercedes would probably be the slightly quicker car, but getting overtakes done here is not easy, especially as we come into this next chicane. Little bit of a laggy collision between the Silvia and one of the limos. The Civic has caught right up to this group, and it was going to be a three-way battle for the lead. And then the Civic disconnected, which was not so good in all of that. Unfortunate for the Civic. While that had been going on, the Holden, well, it had still been circulating and lost a fair amount of time, but yeah, was still going. Unfortunately, that wouldn't last too long. Coming around turn 1, too much speed trying to make up lost ground, and in all of that, yeah, you can't do anything. You can't do anything. You haven't got the grip, you haven't got the brakes to avoid that car. The Holden straight into the side of the limo, and that would be the big Ute out. And the Ute did well, considering it is a very large car for for this sort of a race. But there we go. Now, I, having had that little incident with a slightly laggy limo, had lost a little bit of ground to the Nissan. Wasn't too terrible though, and was sort of working my way, catching back up to the Nissan here. This time around, blissfully clean approach around that final head, but you never knew when you came towards the approach of it. So yeah, there's still a bit of caution. Now the Silvia, there was some strange laggy collisions going on with some vehicles, and it had happened a couple of times thanks to the joys of Forza. That this ended up essentially going through one of the limos, somehow managing to get away without any damage on the car. It should probably really have been the Silvia out, in all honesty, from a collision like that. But either way, while it might not have knocked the car out, he had slowed down and he had lost time in all of it. So my Mercedes was up into the lead here, and with the Ute now out, it was very much a two-horse race. And as we came around on the final lap, the Nissan knew that we had nothing to really lose. They had to go for it if he was going to have any attempt, any chance of progressing to the final. He was going to have to essentially drive the circuit like a normal track, push to the limits, and hope that either I make a mistake or that he can carry so much more speed through a roadblock. In the end, it was too much speed in the braking zone and nowhere to go for the Nissan. Taking a normal racing line and in normal conditions would have been fine, just how the limos were parked up around the corner. Nothing for that Silvia to do. And once you've had to grab reverse, that's, yeah, pretty much game over. So it would be a victory in the first heat for my Mercedes around that final corner there. Been a very good fun race. It would have been interesting to be a three-way battle for the lead had the Civic not lagged out. And for the majority of the race, it was very, very close. A highly enjoyable obstacle course race, this first heat. On to the second round, another interesting selection of cars. An Alfa Romeo, a big Chevy, or classic Chevy sedan, a Mini, and a modern Subaru Impreza. The Subaru, of course, with that all-wheel drive launch, would fire himself to the lead. The Alfa Romeo had a huge amount of straight-line speed. I would imagine decent amount of power relatively. Like the Subaru runs out of straight-line speed as they head down towards turn 1. The Mini's trying to make it 3 wide as the limos have made an interesting alteration to this Long Beach circuit, forcing everyone to go the very, very long way round, essentially all the way down the runoff area and back again. There's a couple more cars on the roundabout. Now, this isn't great for the Chevy. That's not a small car. It's not a small car at all. It isn't easy getting that through some of the gaps. Unfortunately, the Subaru and Mini would have a little bit of contact. I don't think the Subaru realised there was a Mini on the inside. However, maybe it was the gods of karma or just the gods of Forza, because the Subaru would then immediately suffer a catastrophic failure. Now, there is a sticky out bit of wall down here that the Subaru manages to brush, and in doing so, spins the car around. It's easy to do, you turn in a fraction too soon. However, said wall is apparently very damaging. That is 100% steering, driveline, clutch, engine, everything is gone. Brake, suspension, aero, all ruined. Just everything is ruined in that car from a relatively low speed knock on the wall. Certainly we saw cars clonk limos harder than that and suffer way less damage. Unfortunate indeed for the Subaru. Obviously just hit the wall in the right way to have everything utterly die, and that would be the Impreza out of this heat. The Mini would follow relatively shortly. That left just two. The big, heavy Chevy, big, heavy Chevy sedan. Perhaps not too bad. I imagine, in B-Class you can do a fair amount of modification to such a car. And the little Alpha Spider. They head around the final corner. No cars this time around. And, when there is no limos about, it's still a normal race. There's also a lagged-out ghost limo. The fun of Forza replays, really, to deal with. The Alpha actually had some really, really good top-end speed. And it is a rather good job from both of them managing to get through a high speed chicane. The Chevy giving the Alpha a little bit of a bump as everyone's slowing down again, having to navigate across the curb, across the other sort of pit exit area. Sorry, in all of that, the Chevy having lost a little bit of ground, although as we head into turn one, the Chevy gets brave, tries a inside route while the Alfa Romeo manages to goes around the outside, manages, I think he might clip the rear on a tyre bundle, spins the car, gets the car sideways, spins it off the door of the Chevy. The Chevrolet chooses to wait for the Alfa Romeo for kind of, I guess, his part in the spin. Perhaps not so necessary, but good sportsmanship either way from the Chevy, which means that it will continue to have to try and chase down that Alfa Romeo. This time around, no terrible things lurking around turn one, although terrible blindness from both of them to miss the massive gap on the inside. It's surprisingly easy when you see it you see it from the onboard footage. They run up towards it, you can kind of understand why they might have missed it, but both of them went completely the wrong side of the roadblock, tried to fit through an ish gap, ended up spinning out the limos, then both of them managing to bump limos. It wasn't the greatest piece of driving, and the Alfa Romeo was now on the rather poorly side. That's a fair old knock against the against the limo and all of that, and the poor Alpha Spider would be not too healthy, and the brakes on the rather broken side he didn't quite realise, and that's another escape road to go escaping down that you probably don't want to be visiting. No, the limos weren't sending me in that way. That was the Alpha not being able to stop. With the Chevy having taken the lead and with a better conditioned car, it certainly wasn't perfect, better condition than the Alpha. He had backed off and kind of invited a bit of pressure. I wouldn't want it to have quite played it so close. But, you back off, you take a little bit more caution into the corners, you save the risk of damaging your car. And he was having to now work for it. The Alpha threw it up the inside as they try and fit two cars wide around the final corner. It is a bit of a who has the more strength, and then a drag race towards the end, having both managed to squeeze their way through past a limo. In the end, the broken Alpha would not have the speed to do anything about the Chevy, and that would take a little bit of a surprise victory in all of this. The Alpha smacking the wall on the cooldown lap, avoiding a car, to become our second finalist. Heat number 3, we would have a Ford Escort, a Nissan Silvia, another Subaru Impreza, this time a 22B, and a modern BMW. Not too many modern cars, actually, in these races. Of course, the all-wheel drive cars will have the advantage, certainly the traction getting out of these chicanes. It is a very narrow section for everybody to negotiate. The BMW has big issues on the curbs. Of course, you normally wouldn't run the cars ever across that curb, and sometimes Forza can be a little bit mean, and yeah, just bouncing the rear across the curb is a huge sideways moment for the BMW. I think the Escort might have given a Pink Limo a little bit of a laggy bump that made the roundabout a lot easier for everybody that followed. And one of the interesting aspects when it comes to kind of building cars for this is, do you build something that is a very fast B, or do you use something that's a very fast B-class car, or do you use something specifically for obstacle course racing? Because it is kind of two quite different things. You want high grip, you want maybe four-wheel drive even for obstacle course racing to deal with the very, very narrow gaps as the BMW comes a cropper this time on the roundabout with a little assistance from the Escort. But if your car is so purpose-built for the obstacles, then it might not be so good over the course of the lap when there aren't any obstacles to deal with. That's kind of what we were seeing here. The Escort really quick at dealing with the technical sections, but not quite as fast as the BMW when it came to the normal driving. This group, though, still very, very close together, all four cars in a line. However, the Subaru hating wall would claim another victim. That would be the 22B out of contention in this one in a very similar manner. I don't think it took quite as much damage, but It's a mean wall that obviously prefers Evos, as the Escort carries a little bit too much speed into the corner, has to kind of readjust, loses all the momentum down this back straight. BMW would find himself back up into the lead. The Nissan, well, that continued to hold on to the tail of this group, and this was another absolutely phenomenal race. The Escort trying to make the use of his acceleration, looking to go around the outside of the BM. The BM runs, again, way too deep. Much as we saw last lap around with the Escort, a bit too wide. It's too wide between a limo and a concrete wall. It's difficult enough fitting too wide around a street circuit normally, but there literally was space for 2 cars, and they used all of it. The Silvia now looking for a way to fight back. The BMW was stuck on the outside, and being stuck there has to go the long way round an obstacle. That puts him another place down. When you're racing wheel to wheel, if you get stuck on the outside line, that's the one you're going to have to take. You physically can't turn in because of a car you're racing, and if there's a limo in that path, you are going to be the one in trouble. Now, of course, we aren't deliberately moving cars. You know, as racers, you're not deliberately moving cars to the outside because you don't know what's going to be around the corner. So it's a little bit of luck involved. You've got to have some quick reactions as everybody tries to get slowed down. This time it would be the Escort that gets into trouble, barreling through some limos and dropping back. Again, though, it was another one of the weird sort of laggy jumps through the chicanes, and then it kind of punted the limos around. It lost the Escort time, but didn't actually cost it any damage. Forza 7 doing peculiar things with cars. I wish we could have more consistency, but there we go. Down the back straight, still all 3 of them very, very close together. Now it's the Silvia having to try and fend off from the BMW. The straight line speed of that BMW was massive. I had my car in a bit of an awkward place down the back straight. I was wondering if anyone would be brave trying to get an overtake into this corner by firing up the inside. Nobody really wanted to do it. The BMW was clear to move across in front of that Nissan as well to take the preferred racing line. The Silvia fires up the inside into the final corner, tries to make it stick. The Escort takes the really tight line, clips the wall and goes for a spin. It was very much worth a try for the Escort. Take the alternate line past the roadblock. You can make up lots of time doing that. It perhaps would have worked had you clipped the back of the car on the wall. The next block is a tough one. Both the Silvia and BMW ever so slightly scraping that wall on the outside. There's a little, I guess, kind of service road, if you like, on the exit of that corner that the limos were forcing cars to use where they wouldn't normally. Again, much like we saw in the first race, on the final lap, the Escort was running out of time to do anything about the leaders, and it had to be just push like crazy and hope for the best, and inevitably that was a little bit too fast for the poor Escort. He had fought hard in this one, but in the end it was just not quite enough to deal with that BMW. I don't think any of the cars in this race were massively healthy. By the end of it, they'd all taken brushes against the wall, clonks against limos and so on. However, it had been an absolutely incredible event. The BMW overcooks it into the final corner slightly. However, the Silvia, in trying to carry too much speed, ends up in the side of the pink limo, having to grab a reverse to get out of all of that. So it would be the BMW that would progress from a massively entertaining heat number 3. And the final selection of cars to have a go. Mitsubishi Starion, Ferrari 599, Alfa Romeo 75, and a Gasser. Now, the Gasser, a really brave choice. They are not particularly good, not particularly well known for their ability to turn in to corners, especially very, very tight chicanes. One interesting thing also to note with this group, Starion was running drag tyres. Now, that will hamper your grip through the corners, perhaps. You might get a little bit more understeer, and with running simulation damage, they will wear. They could potentially, while it's only a 5-lap race, they can potentially fall apart in that sort of time. However, they do give you big bonuses in terms of braking. So the plan for the Starion was, you know, last minute see a roadblock, the brakes will be very, very good indeed for slowing the car down. It's an interesting idea that we didn't know if it would pay off. Heading into this final corner, again, with some of these sort of roadblocks we were making, the limos, we were trying to design like multiple routes, if you like, on the way through. The Gasser here going around the outside wasn't quite the way to go. Alfa 75 Again, you know, forcing 2 cars through a gap that was barely 2 cars wide. The 75 tried to get past. Wouldn't really have an answer for the Gasser's straight line speed. I mean, the Chevy could make the most of the straights when there weren't any limos around. And of course, when you're not the leader here, you can see what the lead car is doing. You can judge your speed based on what the lead car is doing. And, you know, the Gasser makes up a huge amount of time on that Starion. And the Alpha are also making up time. I think through that roundabout, the Starion might have tried to go through a gap that was a little bit small, nudged the limo out of the way, and kind of made everything easier as well for the cars that would follow. And the Chevy was actually putting the Starion under a decent amount of pressure. Now, it didn't have the turn in for these corners, but mighty acceleration from that Chevy, and it wasn't too terrible through the turns, meant it was going to have a look for the lead, but around the outside of a flat-out blind corner, it's never going to go particularly well in obstacle course racing. Unfortunately for that poor Bel Air, it squeezed. There's just nowhere to go. The Starion is slowing down and can get the car across for that gap. The Gasser can't. It's not got the brakes, it's not got the grip to deal with that one. Ends up kind of getting pinged off the wall. Amazingly, kind of gets out of the way of the cars coming behind and doesn't cause a tremendous accident, and the Chevy gets going again to rejoin kind of the tail end of the field. Of course, the big cars were more likely to have issues. The Ferrari was doing a pretty good job of making it around the course, again with the multiple routes at this final chicane, final hairpin, if you like. The Ferrari gets through, the Gasser trying to make up time doesn't, but you can see it's a tight fit for these bigger cars. I think that the Ferrari, for a lot of the latter part, was resorting to kind of a handbraking his way through these. There were some nasty hidden limos that you had to be really very wary of. At the front, it would be the Starion that would hold on to the lead. The Alpha 75 never really went away through the later stages of this race, but it was never quite close enough to ever have a look. The tyres on the Starion held together as we headed around this final hairpin. So the Starion would go on to take a victory. It would be the only car in the heats here that would have led from the off, essentially. It got the jump down to turn 1 and would lead for the entirety of the race. A good stat when it comes potentially onto the final. So here we have our 4 finalists. My Mercedes, the classic Chevrolet, the modern BMW, and the Starion on drag tyres. Very interesting selection of cars, but there we go. The Starion with that initial launch, as you would expect, heading down towards the first of the big chicanes. Now, we all slow down further back. Sometimes you can end up having a kind of bump train going on. If a vehicle behind doesn't quite slow down fast enough, kind of bump all the cars up ahead, pushing vehicles into the limos and then up sort of closing the gaps. In this case, it was just the Starion overdid it, trying to get slowed down. He bumped the limos, kind of caused a bit of mayhem for all of us further back. We were all slowed, so we kind of just had to sit and wait until it was clear. The Starion trying to find a way back past. I guess, you know, at the end of the day, the Starion lost the lead in all of that. There's no real advantage gained from him bumping the limos ahead. He lost the lead to the BMW. Actually, I think the Starion might have clipped the limo through the next corner. I hadn't had the greatest launch off of the line, and I was happy at this stage to just kind of sit and follow the cars ahead and see what would happen and try to play things safe. There's no point doing anything crazy on lap 1 or 2 because there's a lot of race to go and you're very easy to knock yourself out. As you would expect from the final, all 4 of us were relatively, or running very close on track, certainly close for obstacle course racing. You're never quite sure what you might come up against. Now, again, these guys were, I think, wanting to force us to use the escape road, but the speed we were approaching it, they kind of left half a gap in the middle, and the BMW, with a little bit of Mitsubishi assistance, ended up kind of slightly pushing his way through that one. Like when everything's happening at racing speed, it's easy to slightly misjudge the gaps that were supposed to be around. The Starion running side by side with that Mitsubishi makes a last minute call. The poor BMW, though, would end up in trouble. Ends up on an outside line and just can't get the car back across, with the rest of us ploughing through. He tries to get back across, but in doing so pings off the door of the Chevy, and he would go around that. Would put the BMW a fair way behind. So now it was primarily a 3-horse race. Starion leading the way, Chevy in second. Chevy bumps the wall around the final hairpin, and my Mercedes in third. Now, My Mercedes probably the slowest of these cars in terms of straight line speed, but it was a brilliant car around the corners, a good car under braking, so I knew where I was going to have to try and make passes. It's just Dick. No horribly mean vehicles around that sort of blind turn one. As you head towards the first big braking zone, I see what the limos are doing. I tried to go around the outside of the Chevy. Can't quite do it, run out of room, but Chevy manages to bin it in the tyre bundle all on his own. Now, it gets it going again, grabs reverse, can get the car back going. I was happy to try to have made a move around the outside, but yeah, sadly that wasn't quite to be. And the Chevy, you know, lost some time in all of that, but wasn't completely out of it. Up ahead, you can see the Astarion, you can see my Mercedes. The BMW actually wasn't too far back, although it had suffered a bit of damage in all of his shunts. However, there would be an issue. There would be, in fact, I say an issue. There would be a rather sizable crash. The Chevy, trying to make up time, carries too much speed around a blind corner, clonking heavily into the roadblock. BMW can't stop. Not got no brakes left for that one. The Chevy actually managing to pick up a limo and practically tow it away from the roadblock. The Chevy was done. The BMW did still work, but the Chevy was completely and utterly destroyed in the crash, as you would expect. That was a high speed one. However, not only had it taken out the Chevy, cost the BMW a lot of time, yep, it had also heavily broken my Mercedes, because in the pinball effect, he'd launched a limo forward while I was negotiating my way through said chicane, ruined certainly the back of my car, suspension, aero, brakes, steering was knackered. You can see how much I'm having to fight the car to try and, well, even attempt to keep it in a straight line. It wasn't a nice vehicle to drive anymore, but importantly, the engine was good. The engine was still 100% fine, amazingly, from all of that, which meant there was half a chance. I had to keep pushing on. I didn't know if the Astarion's tyres were going to give up. He had been kind of pushed a lot harder in the early stages of this race. His tyres were suffering more damage than previous race, and in the previous race he'd said it had been at 75% when he'd finished, so there was always a chance. There was always a chance for the Mercedes, and despite the damage, it was still quick enough to give the Astarion's small issues. He couldn't completely let off up ahead. He did try, at one point he did let off for a little bit, and I would catch him, so I had to try and, yeah, keep pushing him. The BMW would also succumb to his damage and fall back. What didn't help me in, well, trying to push on the final lap, brakes were dead. Certainly the brakes at the back were dead, and yeah, ending up in the tyre bundle on the outside of the corner. Not really where I wanted to be. While, again, the car still worked, I didn't do any extra damage to the vehicle, it's just the time loss from that sort of crash is not what you would have wanted. So it was a simple-ish final corner for the Astarion. We knew that they would likely be putting up a roadblock for us before the line. Astarion, tyre starting to wear, couldn't get it around the final hairpin. As you head up to what we would see as the final roadblock before the finish line, Astarion makes the wrong call. He goes to the left of the first limo, can't get it across in time to make the gap, pushes the blue limo to then close the gap that should have been there, has to back it out. I've got all the momentum, go to the left-hand side. Despite the brokenness of the Mercedes, it would be enough. At the last second, after all of the race, it was about a car length to the broken Mercedes. A simple wrong call from the Astarion. Made the wrong decision through the roadblock and then couldn't get the car across, ending up bumping a car and closing up the gap that was there. And because I've persevered, because I've kept the Mercedes going, kept it just close enough to profit from any misfortunes for the Mitsubishi, it would be the 300 SL that would go on to be the victor of the obstacle course racing. We had a lot of fun with this. It's really rather good fun. This sort of racing. It's a bit of a faff to set up, and of course a big thank you to everyone who kind of hung around to create the roadblocks with the limos, because there isn't necessarily always a huge amount going on when you're not an actual car that is racing around. But yeah, we have some really bloody good races, really good races with these cars around such ridiculous circuits, ridiculous stuff that goes on. You shouldn't be fitting 2 and 3 cars wide in some of the places that we were, but that's what makes it massively entertaining. Yeah, we'll definitely have to come back to this at some point because, well, it is, as I said, a bit of a faff setting up. The racing is like, well, just about nothing else, and highly, highly entertaining, and plenty of drama to go with all of it. That, though, is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.